That night, I stood at the gate of an old building deep inside Vatican City. The clock had just struck 11:59 p.m. The city felt as if it were holding its breath. I wasn't a tourist, I wasn't clergy. I was a newly hired security guard assigned to a special event. All they asked was that I sign a confidentiality agreement and obey 5 rules. No questions allowed. The pay was so high it felt like a scam. But when the church bells rang, I realized I had stepped into another world. The hallway lights dimmed until they were nothing but faint glows, and a cold draft slipped through the ancient stone corridors. Then I heard the first footsteps, not like any human footsteps I had ever heard. Some glided, some stomped, some clicked like claws on marble. My heart pounded, but I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, exactly as instructed. Never look up. Outside, Vatican City was serene and timeless. Inside, I was guarding a meeting that no one would ever believe existed, a gathering of non-human entities, negotiating and signing secret agreements only a handful of people on Earth knew about. I had started this job out of curiosity, but very quickly I learned that even a single mistake could cost me everything. That was the night I finally understood why those brutal rules existed. Welcome to Chilling Secrets, the channel where we uncover the stories hidden in the shadows of history, religion, and human belief. Tonight's story isn't a legend whispered in dark corners. It's the kind of story that leaves real scars on those who've lived it. Imagine walking into one of the most sacred, tightly guarded places on Earth, Vatican City, and finding out there's a world behind the marble walls that the public will never see. Imagine learning that your job isn't just to keep people out, but to stand face to face with beings who may not even be human, and your survival depends on 5 brutal rules. If this already sends chills down your spine, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe to Chilling Secrets, and turn on the bell icon now. That way, you'll never miss another true-style story that pushes the boundaries of belief. Tonight, we step behind the locked doors of Vatican City at midnight, where one man's silent vigilance may be the only thing keeping our world safe. I still remember the night Father Benedetto handed me the leather folder that changed everything. Until then, my work inside the Vatican had been uneventful. Quiet hallways, routine patrols, and an unspoken agreement never to ask too many questions. But when he slid the folder across his desk, his hands trembling slightly, I sensed I was about to step into a different reality. Inside were 5 rules printed on heavy paper in multiple languages. They looked ancient, almost ceremonial, but the weight in his eyes told me these were not relics. They were survival instructions. The first rule seemed simple but impossible. Never look directly at their faces. At first I thought it was about respect, the way one might lower their eyes in front of royalty. Only later did I understand it was about self-preservation. Something about their faces unsettled the human mind. Even a brief glance could be enough to unravel a person's sense of self. That night, as I stood guard outside the conference hall, I kept my eyes on the marble floor, memorizing every vein in the stone just to avoid accidentally lifting my gaze. Their feet became my only point of reference. Expensive shoes polished to mirrors, bare feet with curling nails, sandals that looked older than the building itself. In that moment, staring at the floor was not submission, it was survival. The second rule demanded that I always announce myself before entering any room and wait for acknowledgement. This might seem like a polite formality, but in practice it felt like approaching a sleeping predator. The corridors of the Vatican at night are a labyrinth of shadows and echoes, and the entities attending these meetings do not appreciate surprises. By stating my presence aloud, I was giving them time to adjust, to recognize me as neutral, and to choose whether to respond. The first time I did this, my voice shook, the sound bouncing off the high ceilings like a prayer. But a soft reply from the dark let me know I had been heard, and that acknowledgement felt like a lifeline thrown across an abyss. The third rule, keep 2 meters distance at all times and no physical contact, was perhaps the easiest to follow but the hardest to feel. Instinctively, in normal security work, you move closer to assert control or to assist. Here, distance was everything. It was the invisible barrier between worlds. If they brushed against you, the air itself seemed to ripple. Once, when an attendee came too close, The scent of burning metal filled my nose and the hair on my arms stood on end. I backed away immediately, heart hammering, and realized how thin the line was between procedure and disaster. The fourth rule, speak only when spoken to, forced me to dismantle another instinct. As a guard, you're trained to ask questions, to establish control, to project authority. In this assignment, authority came from silence. My words were rationed to yes or no. Anything more invited attention I didn't want. The beings who came to these meetings communicated in tones and languages that seemed to vibrate in my bones, and I understood quickly that my voice had no place in their exchanges. Silence became my armor, and short answers my shield. The fifth and final rule was the strangest of all: never turn your back on more than one at a time. Count constantly. This meant I was always aware, always tracking, never allowing myself to be surrounded. It sounded paranoid until I experienced the subtle shifts of the air when two or more of them were behind me. I could feel their presence pressing at the edges of my consciousness, like static electricity or an unseen current. Counting them under my breath kept me anchored, like holding a rope in the dark. It gave me a rhythm, a mantra, a way to stay grounded while walking the knife edge between the known and the unknown. Over time, these 5 brutal rules transformed from arbitrary commands into a code that shaped every step I took inside those corridors. They were not superstition, nor empty ritual. They were the architecture of survival, the boundaries that allowed 2 utterly different worlds to coexist under the same vaulted ceilings. Each rule carved out a small territory of safety in a place where normal definitions of safety didn't apply. And each time I emerged from a shift alive, I understood a little more why they had been written on heavy paper and handed down like sacred scripture. When midnight approaches in Vatican City, the marble corridors become something else entirely. The tourists are long gone, the priests asleep, the clatter of the day reduced to a hush broken only by distant bells and the soft sigh of ancient air vents. This is the hour when the other world begins to stir, and I am already at my post, counting seconds until the first footsteps echo through the hall. I always know them by their feet first. Long before their faces, or whatever they have instead of faces, come anywhere near me, their footwear announces their presence in a kind of silent code. Expensive leather shoes appear first, polished to a mirror sheen, their soles striking the marble with perfect rhythm. The one who wears them always arrives earliest and leaves last, the leader or the emissary perhaps. Then come the scaled feet, glimmering like tiny armored plates in the dim light, catching reflections from the chandeliers above. Bare feet with curling, keratin claws make a faint clicking sound like a metronome, anxious and restless. Sometimes there are sandals so old they look like fragments of ancient tapestries, leather straps dark with age, fabrics that seem to absorb the light. And occasionally boots whose steps produce no sound at all, as if they were moving across another plane only partially overlapping ours. Their footwear is my map, my guide, my early warning. When I first began these night shifts, it felt like cataloging a nightmare. Over months it became the way I anchored myself, memorizing each pair's pace and cadence. The expensive leather shoes, steady, deliberate, almost regal. The scaled feet, soft but heavy, like rain on tin. The ancient sandals, uneven and whispering. The boots without sound, a hole in reality where footsteps should be. This mental catalog wasn't just a quirk, it kept me alive. By recognizing their arrival without lifting my eyes from the floor, I could track who was entering and whether the numbers matched what Father Benedetto expected. And always it happened at midnight. Not 11:45. Not 12:15. Exactly midnight. At first I assumed it was ritual, a symbolic hour, perhaps. But later, during a rare coffee break, Father Benedetto hinted at a different reason. Midnight sits between days, a scene in time when boundaries weaken. The world's noise dies down, the Vatican empties out, and surveillance systems roll over to the next day's logs. In that moment, he said, space itself is thinner, negotiations easier, certain entities freer to move without disturbing the ordinary world. I didn't ask more. I had already learned that curiosity here was a dangerous currency. The meetings themselves lasted 4 hours almost without exception. Doors closed at 12 and reopened at 4. Between those hours, the heavy would absorb their voices, but sometimes fragments leaked out, whispers in Latin or tongues that rattled like dry leaves. The air pressure changed. Windows fogged from temperature drops, and sometimes the elevator began moving on its own, carrying invisible passengers to places no human had clearance to enter. My job was not to eavesdrop but to patrol the hallways, eyes down, counting, announcing myself at every door. The ritual of repetition kept me steady. Security patrol. Requesting permission to proceed. Acknowledged. That word, acknowledge, was like a talisman. Over time, patterns emerged. The expensive leather shoes would pause near a certain marble pillar, as if taking a breath. The scaled feet individual often lingered by the windows overlooking the gardens, claws making soft scrapes against the sill. Some attendees traveled in small clusters, murmuring in unison. Others glided alone, like dark moons orbiting a hidden star. Yet despite the strangeness, there was a rhythm, an etiquette. They tolerated my presence as long as I followed every rule. All of this might sound like the fever dream of a conspiracy theorist, but for me it was routine until the night of the Code 7 incident. That was the first time the fragile choreography cracked. It began subtly, a thunderstorm hammering the windows before midnight, lightning flickering through stained glass. I arrived early, testing backup systems and emergency lights, a new nervousness crawling beneath my skin. The first group arrived early too, a break from their usual perfection. The leather shoes stopped near my post, and for the first time in months, the voice attached to them addressed me directly. "Tonight may present challenges," it said. "Maintain your protocols regardless of what you observe." The tone was calm but carried a warning. I nodded, eyes locked on the gleaming tips of those shoes. Understood. Then came the second group at exactly midnight, military boots, thick-soled and soundless. I had never seen them before. Their steps were deliberate, their formation precise. One stopped in front of me, and though I kept my eyes lowered, I felt its gaze like a pin through paper. "You will observe neutrality tonight," it said flatly. I answered yes and stepped aside. My heart drummed like a signal. The third group arrived late, another breach of pattern. Their footsteps were erratic, some dragging, some darting ahead, like an argument turned into sound. When they passed, one voice called out without prompting, warning me to avoid the eastern corridor. I obeyed. Inside the hall, the voices were louder than ever. No hushed negotiations now, but sharp syllables that struck the wood like thrown stones. Multiple languages overlapped, sometimes rising in tone like a choir rehearsing a discordant hymn. 1 hour in, the lights flickered. I logged the time and held my breath. For exactly 30 seconds the Vatican fell into a darkness thick enough to taste. When power returned, the air smelled faintly of ozone. 2 hours in, I heard footsteps in the forbidden eastern corridor. Following protocol, I announced myself from the intersection. "Security patrol requesting permission to proceed." A distant voice replied. "Denied. Maintain current position." I stayed rooted, every nerve straining as the sounds continued, scrapes, taps, something like furniture being dragged over stone. My radio filled with static. Father Benedetto did not respond. Backup systems crackled then fell silent. I was alone with rules as my only protection. At 4:30 in the morning, half an hour past the usual ending time, the conference doors opened. But instead of the orderly procession, chaos spilled out. The expensive leather shoes moved quickly, almost running. "Document tonight as Code 7 incident," it said as it passed. "Father Benedetto will understand." Its voice held none of its usual composure. The military boots followed next in tight formation, acknowledging nothing. Their silent departure felt like an erasure. The third group lagged far behind, some supporting others who limped or trembled. One said "successful evening," but the tone dripped with irony. I kept my head down, noting limp after limp, irregular steps like broken metronomes. When the last of them had gone, the Vatican seemed to exhale. I completed my patrol mechanically, hands shaking as I wrote in my notebook. Code 7 incident. Electrical disturbances. Communication failure. Eastern corridor activity. Extended duration. Irregular departure patterns. Each phrase felt inadequate to describe what had pressed against the walls that night. Dawn broke with Father Benedetto arriving, coffee in one hand, pastries in the other, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. He read my report twice before nodding. "You performed excellently under difficult circumstances," he said. "The arrangement will continue, but there may be changes to the security protocols." I asked what a Code 7 incident meant. "A disagreement resolved without permanent damage to the facility or participants," he replied. "Your neutrality helped prevent escalation." That was the night I understood how thin the veil of order really was. The Vatican wasn't just providing a space for negotiations. It was holding back something that, without rules, could spill into the rest of the world. The footwear, the midnight gatherings, the exacting protocols, these were not eccentricities but the geometry of containment. Afterward, the meetings returned to their routine. Midnight arrivals, 4-hour durations, silent departures. But I noticed subtle shifts. The expensive leather shoes sometimes paused longer by my post, as if reassessing me. The scaled feet individual began nodding slightly when I announced myself. Even the air felt heavier, as though the Code 7 incident had left an invisible residue behind. I became more meticulous. I counted more carefully, recorded more details, tested equipment twice. Each sound, each step, each flicker of light became a variable in an equation of survival. The Vatican nights remained outwardly calm, but I knew now that calm was not absence of danger. It was a balance maintained by unspoken agreements, and the vigilance of people like me who stood at the edge of something incomprehensible. The meetings taught me that the strangeness of their footwear wasn't just an odd detail. It was a language of its own, a signal of identity, status, and perhaps even nature. The hour of midnight wasn't just tradition. It was a moment when the walls between worlds thinned enough to allow these negotiations. And the Code 7 incident wasn't a random disturbance. It was proof that the system could fracture, that the rules were not unbreakable, and that neutrality could be the only thread holding the fabric together. By the time the next month rolled around, I understood my role differently. I was not merely a guard standing in the shadows of a secret meeting. I was a participant in an unspoken pact between realms, my adherence to the rules a kind of ritual that stabilized forces far larger than me. And I also understood that behind the polished shoes, scaled feet, and ancient sandals were powers whose conflicts could ripple far beyond the Vatican walls. Midnight after midnight, I stood at my post, eyes on the floor, counting every step, knowing that the peace of the moment rested on something as fragile as the sound of footsteps in a corridor, and the steadiness of a man who refused to look up. In the beginning, every night felt like walking on a blade. The marble floors of the Vatican were beautiful by day, but at midnight they became a cold stage where I performed an act of survival. My heart would race with every footstep I heard echoing from the conference hall. I had memorized the 5 brutal rules like a prayer, because at first that was all they were, words that kept me alive until dawn. But as the months passed, fear began to change shape. It no longer burned in my chest like a warning, it settled into something steadier, almost like discipline. Slowly, I realized the Vatican wasn't merely hosting something strange, it was providing neutral ground. This ancient city of marble and incense, built on centuries of ritual, had become a meeting place for entities who could not or would not meet anywhere else. The walls themselves seemed to hold a kind of truce, a barrier between their worlds and ours. In that space, no one crossed certain lines. The rituals of greeting, the midnight schedule, the 4-hour sessions, even my silent patrols, all of it created a zone of safety where dialogue was possible. Standing guard at the threshold, I began to sense the weight of that neutrality. My uniform, my radio, and my notebook were not just props. They were symbols of an agreement that extended far beyond me. By maintaining distance, by obeying the rules, I was not only protecting myself but also keeping a fragile equilibrium intact. The expensive leather shoes, the scaled feet, the barefoot figures, whatever they were, they all respected the consistency of the space. I had stopped seeing myself as prey and started seeing myself as a custodian of a very precise balance. It was around my second year when the offer came. The individual in the ornate boots, a newcomer with a voice like velvet and steel, paused at my post and spoke of alternative employment. 3 times my current salary, they said, far more autonomy, more power, and exposure to truths even deeper than what I'd already witnessed. In any other life I might have said yes. But by then, professionalism and loyalty had become my armor. I understood that leaving the Vatican's protocols meant entering a world without rules, where survival might depend on powers I could not control. The offer glittered like gold but smelled faintly of fire. I declined, and in that moment I realized my refusal wasn't just about money or danger, it was about purpose. Here, in the marble corridors of Vatican City, my work had meaning. It was contained, structured, and governed by clear principles. The offer promised excitement but also chaos. It promised freedom but no boundaries. And I had learned that boundaries, however rigid, were the only reason any of this worked. That decision became a turning point. The regular attendees began to acknowledge me more openly. A nod from the scaled feet individual. A murmured, "Well done," from the leather shoes. Even Father Benedetto's smile grew warmer. It was as if, by resisting temptation, I had proven myself a reliable fixture in their hidden world. My neutrality was not weakness, it was strength, and it was noticed. By the 3rd year, the meetings no longer felt like isolated rituals but like nodes in a larger network. Snippets of conversation, offhand remarks, and Father Benedetto's quiet briefings painted a bigger picture. Other sites around the world, similar gatherings, other guards learning similar rules. The Vatican had become a prototype, and my nightly patrols were part of an experiment in peacekeeping. What began as a horror story had evolved into a model of diplomacy. It dawned on me that the strange creature's footwear, the midnight hour, the Code 7 incidents, all of it was scaffolding for something unprecedented, a framework where groups who might otherwise destroy each other could negotiate instead. My own professionalism had become a small but critical piece of that framework. Without neutrality there could be no dialogue. Without rules there could be no trust. Without trust there could be no peace. The more I embraced this perspective, the more meaningful my work became. I was no longer simply a guard keeping monsters at bay. I was a quiet participant in an ongoing negotiation between worlds. Each time I walked the halls with my eyes down and my voice measured, I was helping to hold open a space where cooperation was possible. Fear had been replaced by a sense of stewardship. By the time Father Benedetto told me about programs in other cities, I wasn't even surprised. What we had built in the Vatican had become a template, a secret model for conflict resolution in places far beyond Rome. The idea that my silent vigilance might be preventing wars or mass suffering gave me a strange kind of pride. All those nights, all those whispered greetings, all those pages of notes, they were no longer just survival tactics, but building blocks of a global initiative. Looking back, the journey from fear to diplomacy felt inevitable, but in reality it was earned one careful step at a time. Neutral ground had allowed dialogue. Professionalism had earned trust. Loyalty had proven that some people could not be bought. Together, these elements transformed a terrifying job into a hidden engine of peace. The Vatican's marble corridors were still cold at midnight, but now they felt like the spine of a living treaty, and I was one of its keepers. As you're listening to this story, pause for a moment and picture yourself walking those marble corridors at midnight. Imagine the echo of footsteps you can't quite identify, the hush of voices and languages you've never heard, and a set of rules so strict that breaking even one could cost you everything. Would you feel your heart race? Would you dare to look up, or would you keep your eyes on the floor and trust the rules to protect you? Tell me in the comments, which of the 5 rules would you find the hardest to follow? Never look directly at their faces. Speak only when spoken to. Or would it be the constant counting, making sure no more than one was ever behind you? Your thoughts might surprise you, and they might surprise other viewers too. This channel isn't just about telling you a story. It's about opening a door into a hidden world and asking what you would do if you were there. So go ahead, drop your answers below. Who knows, your comment might even inspire our next video on the unseen rituals that take place behind closed doors. Every time I finish telling this story, I'm reminded that what began as fear has become something much larger. A framework where the unthinkable becomes manageable, where rules hold chaos at bay, and where one quiet guard at midnight can help sustain a fragile peace. In a world obsessed with breaking boundaries, there is still a rare kind of power in maintaining them. These secret Vatican meetings show us that sometimes survival and diplomacy are built from the same brick: discipline. If this journey through marble corridors and whispered negotiations has stirred your imagination, don't let it end here. Hit subscribe to Chilling Secrets and turn on the bell icon, because our community is built on curiosity and shared chills. Your support keeps these stories alive and brings more hidden truths into the light. Comment below with your thoughts, your theories, or the questions you'd like answered. Each one helps shape the path of the channel. And get ready for what's coming next. In our upcoming episode, we'll take you even deeper, beyond the corridors and into the forbidden Vatican archives, where locked vaults and secret chambers hold centuries of dangerous knowledge. Some of these documents are so restricted that only a handful of people in the world have ever seen them. Could they be the key to understanding what really happens at these midnight gatherings? We'll find out together. So stay curious, stay brave, and remember, the most extraordinary stories often live behind the most ordinary doors. This is Chilling Secrets, and our next journey starts soon.